I remember the moment she said it. Not the words, exactly, though they've etched themselves into the quiet places of my mind, but the way she said it. Offhand, like a checkbox. Like she was doing me a favor by naming the flaw I'd carried all along. You're technically brilliant, Anika. But let's be honest. You're too quiet for leadership. The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed overhead. My laptop was still open, the cursor blinking on the slide deck I had designed, written, debugged, and tested for the last 2 weeks. The pitch had gone well, objectively. The client's CTO had asked all the right questions, and I'd answered every one, though Tara had stepped in for the final slide to deliver the vision. I had stayed seated, nodding, listening, absorbing. Too quiet. She smiled like it was constructive. A kindness. I nodded, said thank you, and packed up my bag. That's what I always did, agree, retreat, and let the echo settle later. Outside, the hallway smelled of burnt coffee and someone's microwave curry. My desk was still warm from where I'd left my tea. Around me, people typed and pinged and talked about latency, timelines, and burrito orders. The startup buzz. I liked it here most of the time. I liked being part of something sharp. Clean. Building tools that made sense, that did what they were supposed to. I didn't want to lead in the way Tara meant. I didn't want the all-hands applause, the flashy sprint demos, the way she stood too close to the founders when she laughed. I wanted to build something that mattered. Something solid enough to withstand scrutiny, to track truth in a world flooded with noise. But that day her words lingered. Not because I hadn't heard them before, but because they came from someone who had the power to shape what came next. Tara Whitman was new to the company, but she moved like she already owned it. Former product lead at a failed climate tech unicorn, now parachuted in to streamline delivery and amplify impact. Translation: get noticed. She had that polished boldness that photographs well. Spoke in hashtags and vision statements. Knew how to take up space. She wasn't malicious, just efficient. In her mind, people like me belonged behind the scenes. Quiet. Safe. I watched as she took my design doc off the shared drive later that afternoon. Added her name as co-author. Sent it to leadership with a 3-sentence summary and a subject line that ended with rocket. There was a time I might have been angry. But I've learned that anger doesn't help. Documentation helps. Logs help. Precision helps. The next day, she messaged me to say the client wanted a prototype within 2 weeks. You'll own the back end, she said. But I'll present it. You know, speak their language. I typed, noted, then hit enter. I wasn't surprised. I was already sketching the system in my notebook. That part thrilled me. Parsing satellite feeds, running predictive models, integrating emissions sensors into a real-time dashboard. This was the kind of thing I'd joined the company for, work that straddled the line between data and accountability. And still, her voice echoed. Too quiet for leadership. That was her label. But it didn't scare me. Not really. Because I knew something she didn't. Silence is not absence. Sometimes, silence is the only space where real work happens. And when the moment comes, if it comes, I don't need to raise my voice. The truth, if built well enough, speaks on its own. The email came through at 8:46 a.m., a rare moment when I wasn't already in my inbox. I was midway through debugging a memory leak that kept surfacing in our predictive analytics module, something subtle, a rounding error or loop cycle slipping just out of bounds. It was the kind of quiet war I liked best, me versus entropy. The subject line read, Priority Brief, New Environmental Client. Tara had flagged it high importance and tagged only 3 people, herself, Jordan from legal, and me. I opened it without thinking. The message was short, her style always clipped and confident. Team. We've secured a partnership with Sentinel Earthwatch, the climate watchdog group. Multi-phase contract. First deliverable, a proof-of-concept system for tracking emissions manipulation across offshore factories. Think digital chain of custody meets forensics. I've promised we can deliver a prototype in 14 days. Anika, you'll architect the back end. Let's make this one slick. More in the kickoff. Noon sharp. 14 days. My coffee sat cooling beside my mouse, untouched. Sentinel Earthwatch. I knew them. They weren't some greenwashing vanity nonprofit. They had teeth. They'd been instrumental in exposing several major emissions scandals, and they had pending litigation against two multinationals for falsifying carbon data to regulators. This wasn't just another dashboard. This was evidence. This was something that, if built wrong, could jeopardize real legal cases. I reread her message, then pulled up Sentinel's public briefs. Their latest target was a synthetic textile manufacturer using offshore shell factories to offload carbon-intensive processing, clean on paper, dirty in reality. Their only chance at making the case was proving data fraud, something notoriously hard to do without internal whistleblowers. Or a system like the one Tara had just promised them. By 11:58, the conference room was already full. Tara sat at the head, perfectly composed in her asymmetrical blazer, fingers steepled like she was hosting a TED Talk. The founder, Leo, leaned against the whiteboard. Sipping green tea like this was another exciting experiment. Let's talk about impact, Tara began, projecting a slide with the Sentinel logo. They're giving us access to raw environmental feeds, contract data, and limited infrastructure telemetry. Our job is to build them a tool that turns that chaos into clarity fast. She paused, looked at me. Anika will lead on data ingestion, schema design, and anomaly detection. This is her wheelhouse. A few heads turned toward me. I nodded. No one said anything. Tara clicked to the next slide. We want to show that we can track emissions behavior over time, surface discrepancies, and generate a compliance narrative. Think, audit trail meets AI. And ideally, she smiled, it looks beautiful. That's when I knew she didn't get it. Not really. This wasn't about a sleek interface. If Sentinel Earthwatch was going to use our tool in a courtroom, every line of data had to be traceable, time-stamped, and impervious to tampering. They weren't buying a product, they were trusting us with ammunition. After the meeting, I caught up with Jordan from legal. We'd worked together once before, quietly integrating GDPR protocols for a healthcare analytics tool. He was sharp, skeptical, and unobtrusive. They're expecting a lot in 2 weeks, I said. He gave a low whistle. You're telling me. We're walking a legal tightrope. If this tool makes claims we can't back up, we're exposed. They'll want reproducibility, audit logs, procedural integrity, which means no demo theatrics, I added. He glanced toward the glass wall of the conference room where Tara was still holding court. Good luck with that. Back at my desk, I opened a fresh architecture doc. I started with the core, secure ingestion of environmental feeds, normalization protocols, data validation layers. Every assumption had to be noted. Every transformation logged. If the platform ever ended up subpoenaed, I wanted its logic to hold up under cross-examination. This was the kind of challenge I lived for, not just building systems that worked, but systems that proved they worked. Systems that could stand in front of lawyers and say, I told the truth. Still, the tension hummed beneath the excitement. Tara had already mentioned presenting the prototype herself. They respond better to a polished voice, she'd said, more than once. You do the back-end magic, I'll narrate the vision. The problem was, the vision wasn't the hard part. The hard part was making the system bulletproof, accountable, real. And if she was going to be the one speaking for it, she'd better understand what she was standing on. Or she'd fall right through. There's a kind of peace in deep work, the kind that swallows whole afternoons and spits out midnight without warning. That's where I went for the next 10 days. Into the code. Into the data. Into the part of myself that doesn't need to speak to be understood, because the system speaks for me. I started with the ingestion pipeline. Sentinel had dumped 3 terabytes of data into a secure S3 bucket: satellite images, emission sensor logs, transactional factory documents, third-party verifications. Each dataset came with its own format quirks, some timestamped in GMT, some in UTC+5, some with no timestamps at all. Cleaning it was like ironing a crumpled map with gloves on. But I didn't mind. I'd done worse with less. By the 3rd day, I had the feeds normalized, tagged, and streamed into a Postgres instance with an immutable audit log. Every change had a fingerprint. Every gap in the data had a declared null policy. If someone ever asked, where did this number come from, I wanted to give them a breadcrumb trail they could follow without me. After that came the correlation engine, the brain of the platform. I built it modularly. Each script did one thing, and did it well. Calculate expected emissions by chemical input. Compare reported values to expected range. Score anomalies based on deviation from regulatory norms. Color code severity. Flag patterns. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Deterministic. Honest. Tara didn't check in much. She floated through the office, dropping buzzwords in morning stand-ups, synergy, verifiability, scalability, before disappearing into meetings with marketing and strategy. Once, she leaned over my monitor, skimming the raw output of an anomaly cluster, and said, "We'll want to hide that kind of noise in the demo, don't want them spooked." I didn't answer. I just made a note in the log, flag suppressed anomalies per request, not removed from raw report. The system was never meant to be clean. It was meant to be honest. And the truth, when pulled from multiple layers of obfuscation, is always messy. On day 6, I met with Jordan again to confirm the chain of custody requirements. We sat in a side room over cold tea and legal pads, reviewing the structure I'd built. "You're documenting every transform?" he asked. "Every one," I said. "With rollback points. The user won't see them, but the logs are immutable." He nodded, impressed in that lawyerly, unreadable way. "Good. If this data is ever submitted as part of a court filing, we need to prove nothing was tampered with even unintentionally. I've locked the schema and flagged any non-conforming entries. They'll show up as red lines, not silent fixes." He smiled slightly. "I wish all engineers thought like you. They don't. I know. Most of them are too busy trying to make the data pretty. But legal data doesn't have to be pretty, it has to be traceable. Defensible." The UI came last. Tara had already looped in a designer to polish the front end, a sleek React app with animated graphs and toggle views. I didn't object. As long as the core held, the shell could shimmer all it wanted. But I also built a parallel view. A forensic mode. Not linked to the demo version, not styled for PR. Just rows of log entries, timestamps, source hashes, and code lineage. If someone, someday, wanted to dig deeper than the interface allowed, it would be there. Quiet, but unbreakable. By day 10, the system was stable. The tests passed. The edge cases held. I stayed late that night, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to walk away from it just yet. I watched the terminal spit out confirmation lines as data piped through. I thought about what it meant to build something that could hold up under cross-examination. You don't get second chances in cases like this. If Sentinel went to court using our system and lost because of a logic flaw, because someone didn't understand the significance of an edge case or a transformation, it wouldn't just be a failed product. It could be a failed prosecution. A real polluter walking free. I knew Tara wouldn't frame it that way. She saw the project as a PR opportunity. A chance to put environmental transparency AI on a slide and pitch it at a panel. She wanted to impress the client. I wanted to protect them. And that's the part no one ever seems to understand about engineers like me. We're not silent because we have nothing to say. We're silent because we're thinking 3 steps ahead of the conversation. When I finally zipped the prototype package and pushed it to the secure repo, I included the documentation as a separate module. Full system map. Chain of custody notes. Legal interoperability assumptions. It was 63 pages long. I didn't know if anyone would read it. But someday, someone might need it. And if they did, it would be there. That's what leadership means to me. Not the microphone. Not the applause. The system. Built quietly. Built right. The first red flag wasn't even technical. It was a calendar invite. Live demo walkthrough. Final client prep. Sent for Friday, 11 a.m. with Tara as host. Attendees: Sentinel Earthwatch, Tara Whitman, Leo, our founder, and at the very bottom, me. Listed as engineering support. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked through. No notes. No agenda. Just a 30-minute block labeled client-facing environment. Final review. I messaged Tara. "Do you want me to walk through the data logic for the client, or are we doing a scripted tour?" She replied in under a minute. "No worries, just support. I'll handle the walkthrough. We're keeping it simple, no back-end deep dives. Just show them the polish." It wasn't surprising. But it was still troubling. I had worked long enough in tech to know what polish often meant. Obfuscation by aesthetics. Smoothing over edge cases. Selling the sheen, not the structure. It wasn't inherently unethical, but in this case, it skirted the edge of something much sharper. I clicked over to the build Tara had forked for demo purposes. She'd pulled it from the main branch 2 days prior and made some UI modifications. That part was expected. What wasn't expected was the dummy data set she'd substituted for the real-time feed. It was clean. Too clean. No missing timestamps. No flagged anomalies. No red lines. The report summary read like a compliance fairy tale. No emissions deviations over threshold. No suspicious gaps. No cross-site correlation issues. A perfect environmental record. Except that's not what our system had actually detected. I opened the source directory. The JSON files were handcrafted, small, tidy, and stripped of the forensic tags my ingestion pipeline automatically appended. No transform logs. No source hashes. Just raw, presentation-ready fiction. I could feel my chest tightening. Not panic. Not even anger. Just that particular kind of stillness that comes when you realize someone has kicked loose a floorboard you spent weeks reinforcing. I called her. Not messaged called. She picked up after 3 rings. Hey, what's up? You're using synthetic data for the demo, I said. Pause. Right, yeah. Just for optics. The real data's too noisy. Clients don't want to get lost in error margins. But that noise is real, I said. And legally significant. If you show them something that doesn't include those variances. She cut in. We're not making claims. It's illustrative. They know it's a prototype. It's not labeled as a simulation. You've removed the forensic markers. A beat of silence. Then a sigh. Anika, I get that you're meticulous, really I do. But we're not testifying in court. We're just showing the concept. The details slow things down. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how casually she dismissed the very thing that made this tool credible. The details weren't an accessory. They were the product. I'd advise adding a disclaimer, I said finally. And I'd strongly recommend keeping the original forensic mode accessible during the walkthrough. They're not a casual client. I'll think about it, she said. Thanks for the heads up. The line went dead a second later. That night, I pushed an update to the backend service that added a banner to the UI, only visible when synthetic data was active. Simulation mode. Data not legally binding. It could be toggled off, of course, but it was something. Then I printed a hard copy of the full documentation, every transform, every schema flag, every compliance safeguard, and left it on Tara's desk before I left. Not accusatory. Just undeniable. The next morning, I noticed it in her trash can, folded neatly in half. I didn't confront her. There was nothing to gain from it. The more she dismissed the risk, the more visible the boundary became. I wasn't her obstacle, I was her buffer. And when the buffer wears thin, reality breaks through. By Thursday, I had built a shadow deployment. A mirror of the live system, fed by real data, untouched by her edits. Not because I distrusted the team, but because I knew what it would mean if the client ever asked a hard question during the demo, and we had to decide whether to answer with truth or showmanship. This wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about integrity. Quiet integrity, maybe. The kind no one celebrates. The kind that doesn't trend on Slack or get applause at all hands. But the kind that doesn't erode under scrutiny. The kind you only notice when it's gone. I knew it would go sideways the moment she opened with a joke. Tara stood at the head of the glass conference room, gesturing broadly toward the mounted screen, a latte balanced next to her laptop like it had earned a seat at the table. The Sentinel Earthwatch team had joined remotely from London, 4 faces in neat squares, each framed by soft morning light and the sober kind of attention that doesn't come cheap. Our engineers like to get poetic, she said, clicking to the title slide. We call this the truth machine. But don't worry, we've kept the poetry under the hood. They laughed politely. I didn't. I sat along the wall, laptop open, hands still. The real-time system logs blinked on my screen in soft green, quiet, reliable, impartial. The forensic mode was deactivated. Synthetic data was loaded. Banner toggled off. I had triple-checked everything that morning. The mirror deployment was still online, out of sight. The true system, quietly running, watching, remembering. Tara dove into the walkthrough. The UI looked good. Smooth transitions, interactive charts, heat maps that flared orange where emissions spiked, except none did, because the synthetic data had been flattened into compliance. We've modeled the data pipeline on real-world telemetry feeds, she said, pacing slightly. But what sets this platform apart is how it contextualizes anomalies. It doesn't just detect irregularities, it narrates them. That wasn't untrue. But it also wasn't real. There were no irregularities in what she was showing. She was narrating a ghost story with all the hauntings edited out. One of the Sentinel analysts, a woman named Moira, leaned forward on the call. Could you walk us through a live case example, something that illustrates a potential compliance breach? Tara clicked to a slide labeled Case Study, Simulated Factory Flow. Of course! What you're seeing here is a model of how our system would flag an off-hours emission spike. In this case, we've created an artificial deviation tied to unauthorized discharge during a weekend batch. I watched the log quietly. No trace of the mirror system. Good. Moira squinted at the graph. What was the data source for that spike? I don't see a sensor reference. Tara hesitated a beat. Well, since this is illustrative, the data has been anonymized. But it's representative of what we'd catch in production. It was subtle, but I saw it, the shift in posture, the narrowing of eyes. They were listening differently now. Less impressed. More alert. A second analyst, Rahul, chimed in. Would we have access to the audit trail behind these flags? For court admissibility, our legal team will need source provenance. Tara smiled. Absolutely. Our back-end logs everything with full lineage. Anika here built the data chain model. She's a wizard with that stuff. All heads turned to me. I looked up, nodded once. Would you mind walking us through it? Rahul asked. Tara blinked. It's fairly technical. I don't mind, I said, closing my laptop. Give me one moment. I stood and walked to the second console, tapping into the admin panel. I reactivated the forensic mode. A small icon lit in the corner, subtle, but there. The system you're seeing now is populated with simulated inputs for demo purposes, I said evenly. But the real engine is active on a shadow deployment. I'll switch now. The screen flickered, just once. Then reloaded. Heat maps spiked. Red lines appeared on the side. Tables of flagged discrepancies rolled across the screen. This is real data, received through secure ingestion from live feeds. Each emission entry is paired with a sensor hash and timestamp, verified against cross-reference documents from port logs and customs data. Rahul leaned forward. And the anomalies? I clicked into one. This one shows elevated emissions during a shipping hold. The factory reported zero output during that time. Our system flagged it based on residual particulate drift. That triggered a secondary check. Energy consumption didn't drop as reported. Discrepancy score, 91 out of 100. Moira looked visibly impressed now. And this version, this wasn't what we were just seeing? No, I said. That was a simplified model. It hid these red lines. I prefer transparency. Tara remained standing, but her voice had gone thinner. We didn't want to overwhelm you with noise during the first review. But this is the signal, Moira said calmly. Silence. Then Rahul again. Can you generate a report on this data trail? Something our compliance team can cross-check. It's already generating, I said. You'll receive a download link by the end of the meeting. The report includes source origins, transform logs, and cryptographic hashes to confirm chain of custody. Nothing here is editable post-ingest. Leo, who had been watching like someone trying to find a joke in a foreign film, finally spoke. Anika, maybe give them a brief overview of how the system ensures non-repudiation? I did. Slowly. Clearly. No jargon. No hype. Just process. When it ended, they asked 2 more questions, both legal. Tara tried to respond first, but her answers wandered. I stepped in, not to undermine, but to clarify. To anchor. To reframe what she had pitched as promise back into proof. When the call ended, Moira smiled faintly. This is exactly the kind of system we hoped for, she said. Elegant, but rigorous. Thank you. She didn't say Tara's name. Tara stayed behind after everyone else left, eyes fixed on the blank screen. You blindsided me, she said, not looking at me. I kept the truth quiet as long as I could, I replied. She didn't answer. I walked out. My hands were steady. My heart not racing. No vindication. No revenge. Just clarity. There's no applause when you save the room. No music swells. No one claps you on the back or calls you a hero. Most of the time, they don't even make eye contact. They just adjust. Shift their weight. Pretend they saw it coming. After the call ended, the conference room emptied in quiet disarray. Leo made some neutral noise about next steps and retreated to his office, likely to calibrate his loyalty to whoever seemed least combustible. The product designer who'd been sitting to Tara's left unplugged her laptop with studied indifference and offered me a tight, polite smile before walking out. Tara stayed seated, eyes flicking between the screen and her own reflection in the dark glass. I didn't speak first. Finally, she said, "You didn't warn me you were going to hijack the demo." "I didn't hijack anything," I said. "I showed them the system we actually built." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "You embarrassed me." I resisted the urge to tell her the truth. That she'd embarrassed herself. That the moment she stripped out the complexity, ignored the audit trail, and turned real forensic architecture into a sanitized pitch deck, she'd made her own bed. "I gave them what they asked for," I said instead. "Chain of custody. Legal credibility. Actual data. You made me look like I don't understand my own product." I met her gaze then. "Do you?" She didn't answer. Just gathered her things with clipped efficiency, jaw tight. The report I'd promised, 93 pages of structured data lineage, landed in the Sentinel team's inbox 5 minutes later, automatically sent by the backend system once the real-time flags reached a defined threshold. It included a compliance summary, anomaly profiles, and cryptographic log hashes. I hadn't built it for the demo. I'd built it for the world that came after the demo. The follow-up email from Sentinel came 6 hours later. "Thank you for the transparency in today's session. The real-time system's clarity and documentation exceeded expectations. We'd like to move forward into phase 2. Not your team. Not the prototype." They referred to the system. The thing that mattered. The next morning, Leo forwarded the email to our internal channel with a line that read, "Great work, everyone. Big win. Let's debrief Monday." No mention of Tara. No mention of me. Just everyone. It didn't bother me. Not really. Recognition wasn't the point. Survival was. Integrity was. The system had spoken. Around noon, Jordan from legal stopped by my desk. He didn't sit, just hovered with his hand on the edge of the cubicle wall. "Clean handoff," he said. "Impressive. Thanks. I had a call with Sentinel's general counsel this morning. They were especially pleased by the logging design. Said it gave them more confidence than anything they've seen in 6 months." I nodded. I didn't need praise. I needed confirmation the process held. He paused, then added, "Tara wasn't thrilled. Tried to suggest you'd overstepped." I looked up. "And did I?" He smiled faintly. "No. You documented every decision. You labeled every variant. You toggled simulation mode transparently." I checked. "I thought you might." He tapped once on the cubicle wall, then left. "No congratulations. Just validation." That was enough. Over the weekend, I logged into the admin console and archived the synthetic demo instance. Not deleted, just sealed, with a hash signature and timestamp. In case it ever needed to be reviewed. In case anyone claimed it had never existed. On Monday, Tara was late to the debrief. She slid into the room just as Leo was walking through Q3 milestone planning, nodding silently as if she'd been there the whole time. Her name didn't appear in any of the bullet points. When it was my turn to speak, I gave a dry summary of the system's stability, flagged a few non-critical exceptions for the DevOps team, and recommended a short audit cycle before phase 2 expansion. No embellishment. No narrative. Just facts. Leo looked pleased. "Great. Anika, I think we'll have you lead technical comms directly with Sentinel moving forward. You've clearly built a lot of trust." I nodded. "Understood." Tara said nothing. Afterward, as people filtered out, she lingered again. This time, she didn't accuse me. Didn't explain herself. Just looked at me like she didn't quite recognize the person standing in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she'd built a mental image of me that was easier to manage, easier to ignore. Quiet. Background. Technical, not tactical. The kind of person who builds the foundation while someone else picks the curtains. But I don't do foundation work for decoration. I build systems to stand up to pressure. And when they do, I don't step aside so someone else can take the mic. I don't need the spotlight. But I won't let someone use it to tell the wrong story either. Not when the stakes are real. Not when the data matters. And especially not when the silence is mine to break. It didn't happen all at once. That's not how these things work. No email announced it. No promotion memo slid into my inbox. But things shifted quietly, incrementally, in a way I could feel in my bones. The week after the demo, I stopped being copied on updates. I started being addressed directly. When a question came up about Sentinel's security expectations, Leo pinged me instead of Tara. When engineering rescheduled their planning sprint, they asked me to review the schema conflicts before pushing. Not dramatic. Just different. And Tara? She didn't vanish, but her presence dimmed. She still ran meetings, still showed up in strategy sessions, but her words carried less certainty. There was a thinness to her authority now, like static behind glass. People listened, but they didn't lean forward. They didn't echo her. One afternoon, I walked past a product meeting in the smaller conference room and caught the tail end of her voice. "We'll circle back once legal confirms," and then Jordan's reply, "I already checked with Anika." The door closed behind me before I could hear more. I didn't need to. The real fallout wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. The power slowly migrated, not as punishment, but as correction. I got an invitation to join the client technical syncs, not as a note-taker or background SME, but as lead architect. Tara was CC'd, but never scheduled. I was asked to provide quarterly compliance documentation. When Sentinel sent over their formal SLA for Phase 2, they addressed it to me. By name. The trust had moved. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't correct the narrative publicly, didn't write some triumphant thread or forward the client praise to my manager. It wasn't necessary. The code was there. The system held. That was the proof. But I did start noticing small details, the kind that confirmed things were, in fact, different. When marketing posted an internal update about the project win, my name was in the body of the email. Anika Rao's backend architecture was a standout, it read. Client cited data transparency as key differentiator. Not exactly loud, but it cut through. People noticed. Even the engineers who usually kept to themselves began to stop by my desk. One of the junior developers, Liam, always a bit shy, brought me a printout of a proposed module for Phase 2 and asked if I'd review it, whenever you have a second. He didn't go through Tara. He came straight to me. The real moment, though, the one that cemented it, came during a budget alignment session the following month. Finance had flagged the Sentinel project for additional resourcing, new data cluster, added compliance logging infrastructure. Tara began to explain the value proposition when Leo held up a hand. "Let's let Anika walk us through the system needs," he said. "She's closest to the architecture." The room went quiet. Tara blinked but said nothing. I took a breath. And I explained, cleanly, carefully, exactly why the added resourcing wasn't just helpful, but necessary. I outlined retention policies, legal defensibility, expected load increases. I answered 3 questions. No more. The budget was approved in full. Afterward, I stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, staring out at the city through tinted glass. The air smelled faintly of ozone and someone's forgotten lunch. My hands were steady in my pockets. No shaking. I didn't feel triumphant. Just aligned. Like something that had been tilting for too long had finally, gently, clicked into place. Tara passed by a minute later. We exchanged a nod. Nothing more. No confrontation. No apology. And maybe that was fine. Maybe some people don't need to learn the lesson out loud. Maybe it's enough that they feel the loss of something slipping quietly out of their grasp, authority, credibility, the assumption of control. The truth is, I didn't want her job. I didn't want the optics. I wanted what I had now, ownership without spotlight, impact without performance. Let her keep the meetings and the metrics dashboards. I had the source code, the logic. the evidence. And in the end, that's what held. Leadership doesn't feel like what they tell you. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or clear instructions. There's no sudden applause, no corner office, no fluorescent light bulb moment where everyone turns to you and says, "You're it." What happens instead is this. People start bringing you the real questions. After the Sentinel fallout, I found myself in meetings I hadn't been invited to before: legal reviews, client architecture huddles, cross-functional risk assessments. I wasn't there as a guest. I was expected to speak. And when I did, people adjusted their roadmaps. There was one meeting, a quiet Tuesday, late afternoon. The data compliance team was finalizing the metadata retention plan for Phase 2. They'd hit a wall with how to handle cross-border timestamping, a conflict between India's data localization laws and the EU's export regulations. No one wanted to touch it. Someone said, "Let's wait on legal." Someone else said, "Has Anika weighed in?" I didn't jump in right away. I listened. I asked 2 questions. Then I outlined a 3-step approach: consistent time abstraction at ingest, layered legal tagging, and jurisdictional split logging with rollback capabilities. Jordan nodded. Legal approved it the next day. That's what leadership had become for me. Not speaking first. Not speaking loudest. Just being ready when the silence needed structure. At some point, people started referring to it as Anika's platform. I never asked them to. I never corrected it, either. It wasn't ego. It was accountability. If the system failed, it would be mine to fix. And if it held, it would be because I had built something that respected the weight it carried. Tara remained in her role. No demotion. No drama. Just a quiet shift in gravity. She floated on the periphery of the project now, present but no longer central. Her slide decks still landed in people's inboxes, but they were more gloss than guidance. I didn't wish her ill. I just didn't look to her for leadership anymore. Neither did anyone else. And that, more than any formal handoff or announcement, was the real shift. I had a one-on-one with Leo about 2 months later. He wanted to talk growth. That was his word, growth. We sat in the same conference room where Tara once told me I was too quiet for leadership. "I've noticed how you've stepped up," he said. "Clients trust you. Teams defer to you. We're building momentum around your methods." I let him talk. He used words like pathways, vision, strategic anchoring. I nodded when it seemed appropriate. At the end, he asked, "Is there anything you need to succeed at the next level?" I thought about that, then said, "I need space to think. And I need support when I say no." He nodded. That's fair. I didn't want to lead everything. Just the things that mattered. Just the things that couldn't afford shortcuts. The funny part is I never changed. Not in any essential way. I still spoke softly. Still avoided spotlight. Still preferred a clean log file to a standing ovation. But the definition of leadership had moved. Or maybe, more accurately, it had expanded to include people like me. 3 months later, I walked into a kickoff meeting for a new contract, a joint project between Sentinel and an investigative journalism consortium. Same stakes. Same tension. Different room. This time, I sat at the head of the table. The team shuffled in quietly. Legal, data ops, 2 compliance analysts, a fresh hire from product, and 1 junior engineer, new, wide-eyed, probably a year out of school. He wore a t-shirt that read, "Trust the process," though he looked too nervous to believe it yet. I introduced the project. Explained the architecture we'd be building on. Laid out the phases, the risks, the opportunities. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to perform. About halfway through, the junior engineer raised his hand. Not high, just enough to be seen. His voice wavered slightly when he asked, "How did you, make this your thing?" I mean, leadership. Owning stuff like this. You don't really act like the usual leads. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough. I didn't try to act like one, I said. I just built something I was willing to be accountable for. And then I didn't let anyone misrepresent it. He nodded slowly, as if trying to wrap his head around that. I didn't rush him. After the meeting, people filtered out. I stayed back, tidying a few notes, checking the logs from the latest test runs. The platform was holding up. We'd made it modular, resilient to scale, flexible enough to carry new burdens. From the hallway, I heard someone say my name, then correct themselves. You should ask Anika. She'll know. It was casual, unscripted, but it landed differently. Because for years, I had been the one passed over. Spoken about, not to. Counted on, but not counted. Not loud enough. Not visible. Not leadership material. Now, I didn't need anyone to say I was a leader. They already acted like it. And that, more than any title or spotlight, was the win I cared about. Not because it proved anything to them, but because it proved something to me. That patience is a strategy. That silence is not absence. And that if you build something strong enough, precise enough, honest enough, you never have to raise your voice. You just have to let the truth speak.